Good morning. My name is Oscar Loynaz, and I'm the president of Miami-Dade College's Homestead campus. I also have the privilege of serving on the board of the chamber, and I'm the vice chair of the Technology and Innovation Committee. Welcome to today's webinar, Smart Cities, part 2 of a 2-part series. Today is Building the Infrastructure Needs. Last Thursday, we hosted part 1, Ready, Set, Now, Preparing for the Future Workforce. If you missed it, it's posted on the chamber's website. Please see the link on the chat. The Smart Cities series is presented jointly by the Chamber's New World Center Committee and the Technology and Innovation Committee. I am joined here today by New World Center Committee Chairman, David Restainer, Managing Director, Commercial Real Estate for Douglas Elliman. Thank you to our program sponsors, Baptist Health of South Florida, Career Source of South Florida, Florida International University, Miami-Dade College, and Wells Fargo. We have a very impressive and distinguished panel with us here today. We're going to continue the conversation we started last April when we had the Smart Cities series. The focus and angle of today's conversation being building the infrastructure for the needs of tomorrow. What needs to be in place right now for Miami to become a smart city in 5 years? Miami in 2027, 2040? What do we need? What do we have? The importance of digital investment and what are we doing to get connectivity in all households, like water, for example. The infrastructure builds are critical to our future. And also, how do we use technology to improve the efficiency of our infrastructure? Before we get started, though, I want to, number one, run through the logistics of how things will run. Number two, give the opportunity to our sponsors to make some remarks. So, webinar logistics, microphones are muted. So please use the chat box for comments, networking, exchange of ideas, and sharing of information. If you have a question for one of the speakers, please make sure you use the Q&A feature. Our moderator, Matt Haggman, will be fielding those questions in the Q&A box to our speakers. Webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Chamber's website later today. Sponsor remarks. The Chamber is privately funded through the membership dues and sponsorship. None of our work would be possible without the support of our sponsors. I want to take an opportunity to give our sponsors of today's program some time to make some brief remarks. So first, we will hear from FIU. With us here today is William Harden, Interim Dean, FIU Business, Associate Dean, Chapman Graduate School of Business, Professor, Tibor and Sheila Holo School of Real Estate, Co-Director of the Jerome Bain Real Estate Institute of FIU. William, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for attending. I think everyone has a good idea of what FIU is and FIU Business. We provide human capital. We provide people who are ready to go to take Miami to the next level. If you look at how Miami has become a gateway city in the United States and a truly global city, and you look at what and who and how that happened, there is no way that you would not see our universities, especially FIU and our other local universities as leaders in that extension of Miami as a global city. So I want to thank everybody for participating. This is an important task that we are discussing because we need to make sure that people have the availability of digital infrastructure as well as the physical infrastructure that we often talk about. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing what the panelists have to say.
Thank you so much, William, and to FIU. Next up is Joe Natoli, Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer of Baptist Health. Joe, take it away.
Okay, Oscar, thank you very much. It's great being with you all today. And I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot of the latest at Baptist Health, where things have been changing very rapidly. Those of you who've been around for a long time will remember Baptist Health when it was one facility on Kendall Drive in Southwest 87th Avenue, back when 87th Avenue was West Kendall, right? Not so anymore. Today, Baptist has 11 hospitals, 150 or more outpatient facilities from Marathon in the Middle Keys up to the middle of Palm Beach County. Baptist Hospital in Miami-Dade is consistently ranked as the best hospital in Miami-Dade. And with the addition of Boca Raton Regional Hospital 2 or 3 years ago, we now have the best hospital in Palm Beach County as well in Boca. We have the distinction of being the largest private organization headquartered in Miami-Dade County. We've got about 24,000 employees, and that number just continues to rise. At the heart of our organization is an incredible team of compassionate healthcare heroes who've really gone above and beyond the call of duty in the last 2 years. If you've experienced, and really any healthcare organization, Baptist specifically, you realize how committed and selfless the caregivers are, and really the impact of that the pandemic has had on them over what is already a very long period of time. A few years ago, Baptist began executing on a plan to transform from a really excellent community healthcare system to also be known for academics and cutting edge research. And our focus is primarily on 4 centers of excellence: Miami Cancer Institute, the Miami Cardiac and Vascular Institute, the Miami Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute, and the Miami Neurosciences Institute. And each of those is really growing significantly, recruiting physicians from around the country. The Miami Cancer Institute, which is really an extraordinary facility. It's been opened, it just had its 5th year anniversary, and it's already outgrown its 450,000 square foot footprint. In addition to centers of excellence, we're making significant investments in innovation and in digital transformation of healthcare, which you all are going to talk about some of those issues today, through Baptist Health Innovations, which is led by Dr. Barry Katzen and Mark Gotikia, who chairs the Chamber's Technology Committee. We're developing solutions to improve care and operations and bringing best-in-class capabilities to the community. If you happen to have a startup that needs a strategic healthcare partner, we're open to having those discussions. So please reach out to Mark. In the digital space, you may have seen our announcement of $100 million commitment to invest in digital transformation. In fact, it's going to be way more than that. Don't tell Brian Keeley or Bo Bollinger that, but that's just the start. We were very fortunate. We recruited Chief Digital and Information Officer Tony Ambrosi from Disney, and he is really he's recruited some incredible talent from around the country and around the world, and we're doing some very special things in planning for the digital transformation of healthcare that has already occurred in lots of other industries. So finally, let me just close by thanking Rick Beasley, Alfred, and the Chamber. Baptist has been a long-time Chamber member, and I've been involved with the Chamber for more than 30 years, and it's really a real pleasure and honor to be associated with today's program. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thank you to Baptist Health. Last but not least is Hector Ponte, Market President for Wells Fargo Bank. Hector, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Oscar. I'm excited to join all of you today to kick off the second part of the Smart Cities webinar series. The Smart Cities program creates the opportunity to engage in helpful conversations about the future of South Florida and how we can rally as a community of leaders to contribute to it. Technology solutions are not only transforming our cities and providing solutions for our communities, it also continues to transform the way we bank. At Wells Fargo, we're working hard to continue to simplify the way our customers are able to connect and conduct banking either at a branch, through their phones, or online. And if there was ever a moment in time where we all truly understood the power of flexibility in banking and access to services remotely, it's been in the last 2 years and now. The beginning of the pandemic, we had to find ways to help our customers going through incredibly tough financial situations and life events remotely or at a distance. As a company, we're focused on paying special attention to investments that can make banking faster, easier, smarter, and safer for our customers and the whole financial services industry. We understand that to achieve these transformational changes that will benefit our customers, we must make increased investments in next generation technology and leverage third-party expertise and capabilities to execute this new digital infrastructure strategy. That's why Wells Fargo is a proud sponsor of conversations like the ones being held today and the Smart Cities program. To achieve the desired infrastructure that will help drive next generation digital first capabilities for our communities that are fast and secure, we need to come together and leverage our expertise as community leaders. I hope you'll all enjoy today's conversation. Thanks to our speakers and the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce for creating this forum. Thank you and enjoy the session.
Thanks so much, Hector, and Wells Fargo. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of our panel discussion for today, Matt Haggman. Matt is the Executive Vice President of Opportunity Miami at the Beacon Council. In this role, he's leading a reimagining of One Community, One Goal, the community-wide initiative focused on helping shape Miami's economic future. Previously, as Miami Director at Knight Foundation, Matt created and built the Foundation's program focused on propelling high-growth entrepreneurship. Numerous efforts funded and supported under Matt's leadership are now the pillars of Miami's rapidly growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. This includes Endeavor Miami, the Idea Center at Miami-Dade College, Emerge Americas, Center for Black Innovation, Miami Angels, and Babson's Women Innovating Now Lab, among many others. Prior to joining Knight Foundation, Matt was an award-winning journalist with the Miami Herald and Daily Business Review. Matt, thank you for being with us here today, and the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Oscar. It's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to be with everyone here as we continue this really important discussion around smart cities. And today, of course, we'll be focusing on how to build the infrastructure to meet the needs of tomorrow. And as we do this, of course, this conversation, of course, is rooted in the here and now. We're really thinking about where we want to go as a community, that Miami of 5 years from now, the Miami of 10 years from now, indeed the Miami of 2040. What is that Miami of the child growing up today will find when they're ready to enter the workforce? And to delve into this discussion, we have four terrific panelists. Olivia Ramos, the founder and CEO of Deep Blocks. Raimundo Rodulfo, who's the Director of Information Technology and the Chief Innovation Officer at the City of Coral Gables. Avi Patwardhan, Managing Director of Smart Cities with Jacobs. And Angel Garcia, VP of Enterprise and GEMS at Hotwire Communications. Thank you all for joining us. And how we're going to do this is I'm going to start throwing out some questions. We're going to have a conversation here, but I really encourage everyone in the audience to please drop your questions in the Q&A chat. So if you see at the bottom, there's a chat, but then there's also something else called Q&A. Drop your questions there and don't wait. Do them, as they occur to you. And of course, we're going to reserve a good bit of time at the end for your questions, but honestly, drop them in now and we can fold them in, as we're going and make this a conversation that throughout and, includes all of us. So to start off this conversation around infrastructure, I want to start off with the internet and access to the internet. As we think about Greater Miami, think about Miami-Dade County, by last count, it was roughly 77% of households were connected to the internet. Now, by any measure, that falls well short, of course, is where we need to be. We need everyone and all households connected. In so many ways, we have an opportunity to actually finally, once and for all, to address this digital divide that's been a part of our lives since the arrival of the internet through the infrastructure bill, where we're actually seeing the biggest federal investment ever, some $65 billion, and getting everyone online. And it presents the opportunity here in Miami and Miami-Dade County to go from the 77% range, to get from the mid to high 70s, to get up to the mid to high 90s. And by some estimates, recently with Opportunity Miami, we had a sit down with a former chief of staff to the chairman of the FCC, and he said the next 5 to 7 years, he thinks that we can get up to the high 90s here in Miami. They're just about getting broadband where it needs to be. And that's the broadband in the home, the same as electricity and running water coming into a home. It's gotten that important. But with that in mind, as we think around broadband, a fundamental piece of that infrastructure for tomorrow, I would love to hear from the panel about what you think are the things that we must do to get there, the things today for that future of 5 to 7 years from now, where internet sits, alongside and as prevalent as running water and electricity. And to kick us off, Angel, we'll start with you and how you're thinking about this at Hotwire Communications about once and for all ending this searing divide.
Sure, great. Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for the Chamber for inviting Hotwire Communications. Hotwire Communications is very excited to be part of this digital transformation. And just to give you a little background of Hotwire, Hotwire has been around for 20 years. We're a local company based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, minority based. And we're a full telecom company that provides services with a fiber product, fiber-based, 100%. Unlike other carriers and telecommunications companies, we're 100% fiber. We don't use cable pairs, coax, or copper. So we're able to provide homes and businesses with what we call FTTH, fiber to the home or fiber to the premises. So that's giving more and more companies and residential communities the ability to have faster internet, which we know we need in our community. We're also partnering with communities, municipalities and cities to provide free internet services to the masses. So for an example, we are partnering with the city of Miami to provide the Underline, which is a repurposed area right underneath the Metro Rail with free internet for the public. So that's one of many services that we're providing and partnering with municipalities to provide that so needed access to the internet. So we're really excited, and we're really looking forward to partnering with other companies and municipalities to provide such services, not only in Miami, but Broward, Palm Beach, and some of the other areas in Florida and other states that we're providing services to.
Raimundo, I'm curious from, you sit from the municipal standpoint, as you think about every residence in a city such as Coral Gables being connected to the internet. What are the primary pain points to achieving that?
Good morning. Great to be here. So one of the things that we have focused over the years, even because before we started talking about the smart cities, was to build that resilient foundation of high-speed communication. So that's key. And that's something that I bring from my background in the telecommunication industry. I was an engineer in the 90s in the telecommunication industry, and we worked building those smart metropolitan area networks. And so something that we focused in our team here for the last 10 or more years was on building that foundation, which is key. It's a foundation of resilient communications that can sustain hurricanes and power outages and provide critical communications for first responders and for the residents and for the citizens. And also building that layer of connectivity, hyperconnectivity, which is one of the pillars on the engineering side of a smart city service, is hyperconnectivity and hyper automation. And so to be able to do that, you need to have that foundation. Without that foundation, it is impossible to have all those other things that we have been doing over the years, like deploying sensors, traffic and safety sensors, and IoT, or clouds and services to the citizens, digital services and digital twin. So that foundation was key and happened before we started talking about smart cities, like 10 years or more. It's a matter of survival, providing that resiliency, providing that robust, smart and secure. Also has to have cybersecurity and best engineering practices from the beginning, from the ideation step. So I think that those corridors that we have built over the years, so we have built 10 fiber corridors, city-owned, a mesh network, a backbone, a wireless network also over the last 10 years, and metropolitan Wi-Fi networks. So that's key because after a hurricane, we see how residents, they can go to a park and they can talk to their relatives, to their families using Wi-Fi, or we see how businesses in the aftermath of a hurricane, they can open their doors when they lose all the other services. They can open their doors and leverage communication that is underground communications from provided for free by the municipality. So I see that as our role of building that foundation of resiliency. First of all, for public safety, for a business continuity, for services, critical services to the community, but then to support all that intelligence that we have added over the last 10 or 8 years in our smart city programs.
So, as we so much work, as you point out, Raimundo, has gone into building the network and continuing to improve on the network and creating a really resilient network. And I'm going to turn to you, Olivia, in just a minute, but just wanted to on the one more question around broadband. Avi, turning to you, that while a lot of metropolitan areas have built really robust networks, I mean, for example, the infrastructure bill as it relates to the network, so much of that is going to expanding networks in rural areas. But for a lot of metropolitan areas, really the pain point gets to getting people online due to affordability. That the cost is what is keeping folks from getting online where they, even though there's a network readily available. As you think about Miami, obviously, you think about cities nationally, in terms of getting people online, is affordability, as you see it, one of the key barriers right now?
Thanks, Matt. Hey, folks, good morning, and thanks for the chamber. This is Avi Patwardhan. I'm the managing director for Smart Cities for Jacobs, based out of West Palm Beach. Jacobs is an engineering firm of 55,000 people, of course, with offices in Miami and 4,000 staff within the state of Florida. So going back to the question, so affordability has been a big challenge everywhere. But remember, if you look at, and I think Raimundo touched on, it's a fourth utility. Well, if you can give affordable water to the neighborhoods that are poor, why can't we do that on the side of networks? We can, okay? So if you look at the new bill, they're saying minimum $30 per month will be paid such that you can afford that. And it's very critical in the age where we are, if the connectivity, which is a foundation of a smart city, by the way, a technology, putting a smart light is not a smart city. Building the network and the foundation, and then adding the value on the top on smart lighting and parking and building management system, you need to build the foundation, and everybody can get a piece of it. What you need to do is sit down and just work with the city, just we have done for the water and the electricity and the wastewater infrastructure. How do you change and charge to the citizens depending on where the part of the neighborhoods they live in? And this has been successful in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to the names, I can go on that. So no, the network is the foundation.
I really like that frame, and perhaps, if we have one takeaway, perhaps that's it, but it's sort of essentially, as you put it, if I heard you correctly, Avi, that it's our fourth utility. We think about water, we think about sewer, we think about electricity, internet, and really as residents, as community leaders, as business leaders, as government leaders, we really need to be thinking of it in that context, that it's that important. It's really a must-have. And as you said, foundational for a smart city future. Olivia, I want to turn to you, and with your work with Deep Blocks, you talk about how you can canvas a city in minutes with Deep Blocks. Talk to us about, what right now, as we look upon cities, as we look upon Miami, or all of our different Coral Gables, etc., West Palm Beach. Talk about what we know about our cities when we take a quick glance, and what we can know about our cities using technology as you are.
Great question, and thank you, Matt, and the Chamber for having me. And it's an honor to be among such expertise in infrastructure and network, and getting everyone connected is the baseline to the future that we're imagining. And so we think of smart cities. It's really important to understand that a smart city is a self-aware city. It's a city that understands what's going on with itself, and everyone in it has the same access to that information, so that everyone is a stakeholder and everyone has a vote or a say on how a city grows. So we think that the three most important things is transparency, security, and interoperability. And that means we need to access everything that's going on through IoT, which was mentioned, through all kinds of different methods of gaining this information. Things need to be digitized. Right now, Deep Blocks is focusing on digitizing the zoning information. We've digitized 100 cities to be able to run analysis on all 100 cities and see how we can optimize. And the security of that data and interoperability. And someone should mute David.
Hold on, Olivia. It sounds like we've got, if you're not a panelist, if you could mute.
There you go.
There we go.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, sorry about that.
One technology that we think cities can be thinking about today that has the ability to have transparency, security of all the data, and interoperability is blockchain. And that's something that we're really focusing on. If every city can put their information on the blockchain, And that information would be secured, and you can see the evolution of that transformation of information and assets. Everyone will be able to do analysis, including the city itself, and you can then predict how a city can grow. And just as we have self-awareness, we know that I have to go to the bathroom in 5 minutes, so I will mobilize in order to be there at the right time. The city should have the same awareness in terms of the infrastructure can be fixed before something happens. We have an excess amount of leakage of energy in X amount of place. And on the positive side, why are these buildings performing much better? How can we incentivize better performance? But if we don't see it, and if everyone doesn't have a visual to all of this data, it's going to be really difficult to analyze and make decisions based on it.
Awesome. And I want to dig more into the blockchain, and Raimundo will put that question to you if that's something that thinking about in Coral Gables. But before we do that, wanted to try and level set a little bit on the three areas that you talked about, Olivia: transparency, security, interoperability. Let's start with transparency, and I want to take transparency in this direction. Just Avi, if you could for us, a little 101 on what does a smart city look like? What are those sensors that are there measuring our lives, that are measuring sort of daily activity? What are the different ways that we today, and that as we think around the next 5 to 10 years, that we will experience a smart city?
Yeah, I mean, once you have built the foundation, while you're building the foundation, it's very critical to understand and work with the city and the key stakeholders to understand what solutions will benefit the citizens. Remember, one thing one needs to know: a smart city is for the citizens. It's not for technology. Technology is an enabler to help in safety, to help in security, to help in water leakage, to help in smart lighting, to waste management, and I can go on the list that goes on. So I think, and a smart city, Miami-Dade, city of Miami Beach, to Orlando, to Atlanta, they have different visions and different objectives to get. Again, a south side of a city might need a different solution than the north side of the city. So the fundamental requirements of developing a smart city, once you are putting the network together, is to work with the stakeholders to really understand what are their needs, what do you need to do to improve the quality of life and bring jobs to the community. That's the bottom line. Doesn't matter what part of the world you're living in. Smart cities are built for the people. Leveraging and enabling technology as a solution that helps them efficiently. For example, I think Olivia was mentioning on efficiencies, well, 75% of our costs today are in operations of that particular asset. Doesn't matter what that asset is. If we can leverage the network and IoT to bring those efficiency costs down, and by the way, we have examples where we have successfully on a 760-acre facility saved $2 million of OpEx costs for the last 4 years in a row, every year. That's what we need to do. We need to help the citizen to see how we can efficiently use all the resources within the city and provide services that they need rather than services that, you know, a smart light might provide. It has to be aligned.
You know, to your point, I mean, you think there's so many different directions a community can go in, and that's why it's going to be so important to really having those transparent, engaged conversations. But I wonder if you might just give us a few, for instances, of where we can go in terms of what a smart city can look like. Is that, you know, that a smart city where that traffic lights change when there is increased volume of traffic, they change at a greater volume? Or is it counting number of people going through a park? And so municipalities know that what are the parks that have more activity? Talk about some of the for instances and perhaps some sort of baseline things that you suspect we'll see in all cities.
Yeah, I mean, so the lighting, we are seeing this across the globe, across, you know, in Florida and Miami-Dade. And the key thing on the lighting is all of a sudden you get a 30 to 50% reduction in energy cost. So lighting is a great solution. So is parking. Another thing that we are seeing that really people, if you look at the infrastructure that we have in Ghana, just look at water where we are in Miami-Dade, we're losing close to $100 million of water in non-revenue water through leakage in our distribution system. So can we use the technology, the networks and IoT to minimize those losses? By the way, we did that in Gwinnett County, Georgia. We have done those type of projects in elsewhere and actually showing the community how it can be done. Guess what we're using? I think something Olivia touched on, predictive analytics. So we can predict today what's going to happen to your system tomorrow, the next week from now. And the way you do that is you baseline your systems today. You collect the data, you baseline them, and then when you see anomalies, there's a trigger that is sent to the city managers, to utility managers. They say, hey, this thing is going to happen. Can you fix it? Another thing that we are seeing in efficiencies, remember we like to dig up holes in the right of ways and one time put water pipes in there and second time put the network in. Well, these predictive analytics, then you can say, okay, these two things are going to be there, but one is going to be about a month apart and this, well, why don't we then put them together and develop a solution so we don't have to dig the roads twice? And those are the efficiencies that we are seeing we're bringing to the clients. You're saying, is it building management systems where you can save 30% of the energy and water, or is it non-revenue water in the streets, or is it even wastewater collection systems such that you don't have sewage overflowing on the city streets? So the solutions are tremendous. I'll give you an example of a digital twin we did for the city of Seattle, in which we created operating rules for the operator in case of wind speeds, events of rainstorms, and other calamities that could happen. And how do you operate the system? Guess what? Those operating procedures are not there. And a concept like digital twin helps you get there.
Abby and
Please,
Jacobs have been partnering with municipalities along with Hotwire Communications. And to give you some of those examples that Abby was discussing, as it depends on the municipality and their needs. But some of these examples could be environmental services where they need sensors around their facilities or their area, so they may want to connect those to a network. Street lighting, they may want to have an ability to focus the lighting into noise, a shot, or what have you, depending on the need. Surveillance for police cameras, wireless services for their constituents. So it depends on what the municipality, the city needs, where we can then navigate, help with Jacobs, Hotwire, and other partners, educating, helping the cities figure out what they need. But it all starts with IoTs. It all starts with the gear, with what they are looking for. And then from there, we can make recommendations, as Abby mentioned.
Yeah, so to add on to what Angel was saying, so City of Miami Beach, where we both are working together, one of the things, just like when you build your house, you do a master plan first before you build the house. Well, it's the same story that City of Miami Beach and other cities are doing. City of Orlando, where we just completed, is develop a master plan. Do you need a house with 4 bedrooms, or is it going to be a 2-bedroom house? Because that's going to define the network that you build. It's going to define what solutions and services you build. So people need to understand, let's start what we call as a digital roadmap and a digital strategy before, putting everything in the ground and spending millions of dollars. Because one knows, if let's say, buy a technology today, 3 years from now, that technology is obsolete. Your iPhone, it's in 13 version now. You try to use iPhone 6, it doesn't work. You try to use iPhone 8, it doesn't work. It's the same thing true with technology. And that's why developing a digital roadmap and a strategy that Angel and I and others were involved in City of Miami Beach is a critical foundation of moving forward.
And it all starts with that network, that highway, that fiber-based network.
But Angel, the issue right now is that network is only going to about 3/4 of the population in Miami-Dade County. And so that's why I think having these sorts of conversations are so important. Number one, highlighting the fact that we have large parts of the population that, as we think about the smart cities right now that we're trying to build, are not part of it. But also, why I think these conversations are so important is that I think for a lot of us, we have no idea what's possible with a smart city, right? What are those different things that we can be doing? And with that in mind, I'd be curious, Olivia, to turn to you. You're digitizing zoning applications. So in that work, what else comes to mind of things that we can be digitizing and measuring in terms of the life of the city?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So by digitizing zoning, we understand the future of the city, a concrete future of the city, because we can measure then the density, the number of people that can move in, the number of units that could be expected, and therefore have a better understanding, like Avi mentioned, on what technologies and what size of systems we're going to need. But in terms of imagining what this can do, especially in South Florida, let's say if everyone was collecting solar energy, for example, with an interoperable system and micropayments, right? Whenever I'm not using my energy, I can be selling it to my network. I can sell it to my neighbor. I can sell it to the school that's now in the middle of the day using it. And we can generate this transfer of energy using solar, and everybody benefits and get paid for doing that service. So there are incentives that we can do at a macro scale with interoperability and IoT, and using the blockchain, of course, because the blockchain is really a way to prove that these things exist and have this information safe rather than centralized. Everyone would have access to it, so they would trust it. And so that's one giant example, but a smaller example, something really simple. If every object that is sold is an NFT, it's an individual object, let's say my espresso from Starbucks, and now we're tracking this espresso, not where it's going, but the fact that it lives, and then it's thrown onto the street, and there's a sensor that's looking at when garbage is thrown onto the street, I am immediately taxed because I bought that espresso cup. It doesn't have anything to do with where I am or what I'm doing. It's the fact that this is an object, the object is being tracked, and the object should go into the recycling. Now, if I put it in the recycling, I get some kind of token or city coin. This is where we can go into the future, where we are now connecting every single object, every single system, and every single data point from sustainable systems or resources, and we can monetize and encourage a society to be more optimal together.
So with that in mind, we turn to you, Raimundo, and in fact, this is the perfect question that actually is that Jorge Valens just asked and put in the chat. Coral Gables is an amazing, thanks to your work and thanks to the work of everyone here, is an amazing example of a connected city. How does it make decisions? So as we're talking about these different ways to go of different smart city projects that Angel and Avi and Olivia talked about, how do you make your decisions as a city about what to prioritize for smart projects?
Thank you. That is a great question. Basically, a smart city is an integrated concept. So it's a holistic concept. Basically, is leveraging technology, innovation, and best practices to continuously improve quality of life and bring value to the community, bring operational efficiencies. And so in our case, we have a holistic framework. We call it a smart cities, a strategic management framework that contains 8 components or 8 sub-frameworks. And basically they have from vision to planning to execution to a strategic realignment. So it's a strategic realignment cycle that aligns with the needs and priorities of the community, but also with strategic goals of the organization. So every smart city project is a strategic project. They have to have an alignment with the goals, with the mission and the vision of the organization and the constituents. So that's a process that is key. So, and that's first. Then before you get to technology, so you have to look also into process improvement. One of the first smart city projects that we did was not necessarily on the technology side. Was for example, was a citywide industrial engineering process, a Lean Six Sigma process improvement. And then when we bring this kind of frameworks and technology to the organization, we bring it to a lean process, to a process that has been already improved, and the organization has been improved from within. So then you bring technology to that, and you align technology, and you make it a priority to solve problems or to bring value. In our case, so this infrastructure, first of all, is bringing services, is bringing business continuity to the organization, is providing critical services like 911, like police safety to the organization. So what do you prioritize? So if you look at our framework, and maybe later I can post a hyperlink here in the
Sure.
chat for everybody's benefit, which I just did. So if you look at that, it's a big picture, and that strategic realignment cycle is what really allows us to continuously prioritize, but also reprioritize. So the priorities of today may not be the same priorities of tomorrow. The priorities of a neighborhood may not be the other priorities of another neighborhood. If a neighborhood is closer to the coastal area, they may have environmental concerns that are not too much you're going to find in the downtown area, where maybe economic concerns are a higher priority. So using AI and machine learning for sentiment analytics, for example, we get continuous feedback about those priorities. But at the same time, getting the community involved in this process also gives us what are their pain points. So when we started, for example, our smart city program like 7 years ago, and we had already built that foundation, high-speed communication and fiber optics, that we have continued expanding. So at that moment was, okay, let's build the intelligence. Let's build that layer of cyber physical systems, of traffic sensors, safety sensors. At that moment, public safety was a concern. So we needed to use technology to improve quality of life and police safety. So the police department, leveraging this technology, this automation from sensors and from data and from analytics, they were able to reduce crime 40% in just 2 years, and also traffic accidents. And for example, our IT analysts one day in our community intelligence center, they were supporting police during a crowded event, 50,000 people in Miracle Mile. And then one couple called a police officer because they lost their child. And the police officer just communicated with our CIC and our analysts using artificial intelligence, computer vision, morphological analysis. In just 2 minutes, they found the child. So that's the quality of life impact of this technology, of these systems, and how it translates at the end in helping our community.
Is there, and I put this to the panel, is there right now, do we have a couple sort of flavors of the month? Like what's sort of the bright, shiny object of new infrastructure projects? Is it thinking about developing car charging networks in communities as we're beginning to transition to electric vehicles? Are there a couple things that come to mind that are become particularly topical that you're hearing from people a lot, or even among colleagues you're talking about a lot? Avi, do you want to start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the ones that we have been hearing a lot from the client is this talk about autonomous vehicles. What does it mean? You know, how do you deliver them? How do you develop them? Because at the end of the day, network is the foundation needed for the cars to communicate. And we know this, the 4G LTE that we have today gave birth to Uber. So we know that the 5G that is coming in is going to give to the autonomous vehicle birth. But to do that, you need to test them. You need to test how the vehicles are communicating not only with the road, but to the infrastructure and to the people that are going there. So what we are seeing is there are a lot more real-time applications in which people are testing them in the roads to see how the autonomous vehicles behave and interact not only with the street infrastructure, but with the pedestrians, with the bicyclists. Talk to the car that is 100 yards in front of them. And you were talking about traffic signal changes, right? If there's an emergency, if there is a fire in a police truck, how do they communicate such that the lights turn green? And that technology is what is getting tested. And for that, we need low latency 5G communication technology. That's going to give a couple of benefits. So the autonomous vehicle being a talk that is very much needed. If you look at the gas price, people are also looking at, can we narrow the width of the road and have some money aside that could be saved for letting people use that money for something else? Can that be carpooling coming into play such that you just order a car, it comes to your door, takes you from place A to place B, drops you off, and off it goes and collects somebody else. So these are technologies that we're being tested. The second one that we're seeing is an integrated city command and control center. And I think City of Coral Gables has part of that solution. I think it's integrating all department and services into a single pane of glass, be it water, be it energy, be it solid waste management, traffic, police. Of course, you have to segment that, who gets access to what data, how the data is secured, what the policies are. But we are seeing a big need and ask for real-time operation of assets and on the autonomous side of vehicles, because people hear about this, but saying, how does it really work? And how can you help us get there?
Sure. Now, in talking about these different applications in this smart city world, and obviously getting smarter and smarter city world, of course, a big issue is around security. Indeed, we have a question here. This all sounds wonderful, but please talk about privacy and cybersecurity aspects of this smart cities concept. Angel, why don't we start with you in terms of how should we think about this in terms of our world is one, our information is one that is Hotwire is delivering and in charge of, really in so many ways caring for. How do you think about cybersecurity, and how should we be thinking about it as individuals?
Sure, thank you. And that's key, and that's why we work very closely with municipalities and cities such as Coral Gables and others in South Florida. Security is a must for these entities. And what we do is that we provide an institutional network. It's called an INET, where we are providing them with a very secured network, which is not using the internet. The internet is obviously a way of communicating, but these additional layers of security are being obtained by having a network that does not leave the city. So City of Coral Gables has their own private network, which makes it a lot harder for cyber crimes to happen, because they're not letting others connect to that network. It is their private network that connects the fire department, connects the city hall, the police department, and any other entity that they may want to allow. But it is much tighter, harder to get to, because they are owned by the city. It does not leave city limits. It is what we call almost foolproof, and it's dark fiber that they're only allowed to connect to if they have, obviously very secured access points. And I'm
Yes.
sure Raimundo could elaborate on that. Sorry, Abby.
Now, a couple of things to add on that. One of the things that we're seeing, so once your network is secure, you have to secure the devices too that you put on. Because we have seen, just last year, Super Bowl, north of Tampa Bay, when they tried to hack into the water systems to change the chemical dosage that goes into your water treatment plant. We have seen targets, heating and ventilation, cooling system. So these are all the IoT sensors that you can go in. So one of the things that Angel touched on that a lot of cities on the network are looking into is building their own private enterprise LTE networks. Multiple benefits for that. One, the city owns the network, so it can give the fourth utility to everyone. That's a critical benefit that comes in. And the second one, as we've been talking about sensors and IoT. Well, guess what? For each sensor, there is a SIM card. And for each SIM card, you pay a charge to the telecom companies or telcos, anybody, whoever it is. Well, if you own your network, you don't have to pay those charges. And guess what? You recover those costs instantaneously after you get those deployment. And I bet Raimundo can expand on that. That's a huge benefit and a new trajectory that we are seeing in the market is developing private and enterprise LTE networks.
And again, it all starts with that network, that fiber-based network that the cities will have to then be able to put whatever they want on top of it. Is that highway that they need in order for them to operate correctly and efficiently.
I must say, like to think of myself as being fairly informed, but I don't know how, I didn't know this, but that cities are actually building their own private networks. How prevalent is this? How often, how many cities are actually making these sorts of investments, or is it really just the larger municipalities we're seeing doing this?
I mean, I'll speak for Hotwire, but we are getting more and more inquiries across Florida and other states because they want to be that smart city. And again, smart city could be whatever the flavor of the month is, as we were talking about earlier. What are they interested in acquiring? Is it free internet for their constituents? Is it security for their, you know, their police department? You know, again, the environmental sensors that we spoke about earlier. It could be a flavor of whatever they're looking for, but it all starts with that foundation, that network, that it's a secure network, converged network that is going to allow them to put whatever they want on that highway.
And just to be clear, that typically when, Tom's right, but when cities are building their own private networks, that's to be connecting, you know, priority uses, police, fire, hospitals. Is that right? And it's not like residents are themselves having a use of that. Is that right?
It depends. It depends. I mean, there's cities out there that are providing internet to communities, and again, we are offering that as a FTTH, you know, fiber to the house or fiber to the premise. So they will have a direct connection from that network to a home, you know, one of their buildings or whatever they choose to do.
So Matt, the fiber to the home is getting traction. So if you look at just in Florida, Lake Nona, you know, in Orlando was the first one to deploy that. Well, guess what? It is getting traction from Chattanooga, Tennessee, to Fullerton, California, to Kennesaw, Wisconsin, to City of New Orleans, Louisiana, to everywhere. This is the new frontier, if you ask me. And like Angel was stressing, you know, what is happening is cities are saying, okay, well, can you build a private network for our hospitals first? Because remember the amount of data on the MRI and things that you need to, can we start there, test it, and then start expanding for that? So private networks are built for the airports, private network for the hospitals, sports stadiums, educational campuses. So this is a phenomena is changing the market right now.
So Chattanooga, which I think arguably is the very best or the most high profile example of a city that the municipal, I guess it was the utility wired the city-owned utility wired the whole city for consumers to plug in. You think that's something, even though that's been around for some time, that's a model that we're going to see replicated quite a bit more in cities as we move forward?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would add to that, Matt,
Please,
that
Olivia, please.
We're focusing a lot on security, like almost further fragmenting our cities, and security is a huge it's a huge issue, and we need to do it without losing transparency. So you've asked me, what are we doing digitizing 100 cities with zoning data? We're running analysis on all 100 cities to be able to inform one city to another, to be able to say, this works really well here. You have a similar situation, because we're combining zoning data with demographics, with land value, with property information. It's all about the joining of this information. And we imagine joining in IoT devices and everything in one place to run artificial intelligence analysis on it, right? So if cities don't share this data with companies, with bigger companies such as ours that are connecting many cities, they might be left behind because they're not benefiting from the collective insights and the collective optimization. So although security is super important, transparency, I think, it's even more important for the economic progress of a city.
Raimundo, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, that is key. I fully agree with everything he said. So basically, in our case, we have been providing that digital equity, that digital inclusion and services to the public, connecting the community, connecting our smart city ecosystem that we define as people-centric. It's people, businesses, organizations, things, and systems. Basically, it's an ecosystem that is robust and it's complex, but it's people-centric. People will say the residents, the visitors, and our tourists and our students. So we are the home of the University of Miami, so we have a large population of students in our city. So we are providing connectivity for the public and for the services that serve the public. But at the same time, we are also connecting that infrastructure that is accessible, like smart city kiosks, like sensors, and also helping businesses and community to be resilient after a hurricane, have that connectivity also that is key. Now, on terms of delivering that those services in the transparency part, we implemented what we call a smart city hub public platform. So that platform basically provides a lot of services. It's like a digital supermarket, and it provides a lot of open data and services, digital services that are free to the public. For example, the businesses, they see in real time in our urban analytics AI platform dashboards, they see the traffic from vehicles, from pedestrians, so they can understand how they can leverage that data, especially during the pandemic and the recovery that is happening. There's small businesses that have been seriously impacted by the pandemic. They can leverage that data to know when is the best time to open the doors, to close the door, marketing or sales strategy. How can they inform and make decisions? So actionable information is what we are providing, actionable insight. So I invite everybody to visit our Smart City Hub, gables.com/smart city, that I'm pasting the hyperlink in the chat to everyone. Here you will see how we deliver that digital equity, that digital inclusion, that transparency portals, and all those tools, all those open data tools to our constituents and to the public. And startups, businesses, students, researchers, they also leverage that data, like marine biologists, they leverage the data from our water canal, water quality sensors, electrochemical parameters like salinity, resistivity. We can also use it during the Emergency Operations Center, where we help 6 entities in our region. They come to Gables, like the university and 5 other cities. They can see real-time data from water canals to detect, for example, flooding alerts. Or they can see from our hyperlocal weather station in this building, the public safety building, they can see things like hyperlocal wind speed and rainfall. So all that data informs decision-making for first responders, urban planners, traffic engineers, officials, and is key during a situational awareness scenario.
What are there, as we think about sort of baseline things that we should be looking at for communities that want to become prepared for this smart city future, for this connected future, for this online, well, we're living in the online present, but as we think about the more and more applications going forward, are there some basic things that we in each of our communities, or we as individuals, should be thinking about and counting? For instance, we at the outset of this conversation talked about, fundamental is everyone needs to be online. And we can measure how many people, how many households, for example, are online. But of course, then the questions go beyond that. Then of course, folks have, their phones and are connected that way too. But nevertheless, we can come up with some broad numbers around connectivity, also speeds, but are there other things, some sort of baseline metrics that we should be thinking about as individuals and community members about, that, and particularly as we're talking to folks like yourself, professionals in the space, elected leaders, so that we can be having an informed discussion with them and you and thinking about these things? What are those baseline metrics that we should be aware of? And I guess, Avi, why don't we start with you? When you think about a community, so sort of those baseline things, how many people are online or what else?
Well, how many people are online and things are all fine. I think the first and foremost, if you ask Raimundo and he went out in city of Coral Gables and asked 20 people, what is a smart city? He will get 20 different definitions. And so the fundamental of developing a smart city, a smart infrastructure, future city, which is what Orlando is calling it, is working with the stakeholders to really understand what the needs are. Okay, network, we all know everything is needed. COVID-19 has really made it even more clear than it was before, that, if you want to communicate to elderly in your community, hey, don't go out, there's a masking and there's COVID spread in your neighborhoods or your hospitals. So, well, stakeholder involvement and integration is very critical, because one of the things I've bet Raimundo has struggled with is the citizen saying, hey, you're collecting my data and you're using my data and selling my data. So there is a lot of things that you need to do as a foundation before you start going and deploying stuff. Of course, everybody knows network is needed, but you need to get the citizens engaged. What are you doing with that? How are you going to leverage it besides giving connectivity to them? Are you collecting the data? What is the governance? And how are you leveraging that? So if you ask me, the number one challenge right now is on getting, if you just look at Raimundo, he's saying, well, he's engaged the FIU students. He's got the marine biologists. He's got all the stakeholders because everybody has a different need from the network that is being deployed. And that is the reason I say stakeholder participation while you're building your city as becoming a smart city is the foundation.
All right, let's talk. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that question? Just
I mean,
basic-
it's very basic, Matt, but it's, you know, again, stakeholders need to agree, but, you know, also, you know, a foundation is also having the funds available to actually create this network, whatever it is, whatever it means to that organization, they need to have the funds. These are not cheap, you know, networks, but obviously fundamental for the cities. But again, one thing that I would say is they need to agree on spending the money because these are, again, expensive projects for cities and municipalities.
I want to return to that, but Olivia, just wanted to, you're thinking about cities every day, and particularly in this case, and specifically the deep blocks digitizing zoning applications. But as you think about sort of what we should be measuring as a community and making the smart city transition, as has been said oftentimes, you know, smart cities are the smartest are responding to the needs of the residents and, you know, and what people want. But let's dream a little bit, and just from our own observations and the communities that we live in and how we look at cities, what are some of those areas do you think that we should be measuring as we think about smart cities?
Yes, if we can have some kind of baseline, so, we can have a visual of how much of the city's data is digitized and available. I think if we can figure that out, we'll know how much stakeholders are involved or not. So for example, there is let's say 100% of the data in the city, 10% is digitized and available. Today, I'm not able to say, hey, city, give me all of the construction draws for all the affordable housing projects that you funded so that I can do an analysis on construction costs for affordability and I can optimize suggestions on people who want to build affordable housing. I have no access to that data. I have to ask one project at a time. There's tons of red tape. So, and that's one tiny example in one small department of a very large operation, which is the city. So if we can digitize that and have that as a goal and make it available so that analysis could be made, that would be really dreamy. That would be very dreamy. We can have optimization of sustainability, of affordability, of transportation. If that data was available to research, such as, you know, our startup.
So it's like we talk about, for example, public transportation. I mean, right now, if you readily wanted to know how many people are riding the metro rail every day, that maybe that's easy to find, but maybe not. And your point is digitize everything. And
well, you know what I would say with this caveat, I am not as interested in personal information. And I think that's a really important conversation. Yeah. I'm more interested in building operations. How much water are they using? How much energy are they using? How much is that taking from our infrastructure? How much waste are we throwing into the ocean? All of these things that are at the city and building level, even that has tons of work to be done before we get to the individual. And the individual, I think it's another kind of webinar on what that means. But I would stick to city and building. There's tons of stuff to digitize so we can really optimize the way we live.
Makes total sense. And just like we touched earlier on security, there's a whole issue around privacy that we can have a whole another webinar on. But just to add to your list of things you mentioned, once you think about having to transition our whole economy globally to one that is carbon neutral or net zero, we could be measuring that in really transparent ways. I wanted to a question from Jessica Ibarra that really goes to the speed at which that we can continue to build smart cities, and particularly with the networks. And she says here, she asks, what policies can local governments adopt that would reimagine how providers work with the cities to place networks into neighborhoods in a much shorter window? 60 days or less, for example, she writes. Angel, do you want to speak to that? I mean, in terms of in the areas where the network can be a lot better. Are we getting faster in terms of shoring up those areas or not?
I believe we are. It all starts with, an agreement and collaboration with the different cities. For example, Hotwire is always inquisitive of building our fiber throughout, communities and municipalities, but we need to partner with those cities. We need to be allowed to trench, through the right of way to be able to then reach those buildings, homes, places of interest for this fiber. So it all starts with the agreements with the cities, permitting, and then the physical work that has to take place in order for us to be able to build our network into those facilities.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so I think Angel touched on a big point, which is permitting. It's very critical because remember, there's not just a permit from the city. There could be a permit from Army Corps of Engineers. There could be permit from other entities. And those 60 days that was touched on, it takes more than that just to get a permit. Because there's so much backlog within the cities right now. So permitting process, and there's some new ideas being talked about, is kind of getting a blanket permit for the city by working with all the stakeholders. So the new ideas coming in to speed up the deployment. But permitting is, Angel's team can sit down and design it if you want within 24 hours, but they won't get a permit for 90 days. There's nothing he can do.
Correct. And it's taking a lot longer than 90 days. But it's working closely with the cities, having a good relationship with those cities, and just making sure that we're here to their needs. But Avi hit it right on the nail. It is that permitting. We can physically probably do the trenching and the building of the physical infrastructure within days or weeks. It is more what has to happen before we actually trench. FDOT, maybe trenching underwater, railroads, and again, the bureaucracy in some cases, sorry, Raimundo, from the cities to be able to then get the work done.
Ooh, it sounds like that's still a challenge. Help us understand when we hear about these other technologies coming along around providing access, about how we should think of them. For instance, Starlink, right? We've read about how satellites being shot up into low orbit, have enough of them encircling the globe, and be able to get our internet in ways that there's actually no need for trenching or local government permitting. In fact, it's coming to us elsewhere. How should we as consumers, as business owners, how should we be thinking about these emerging technologies? Avi, do you want to go first?
Sure, I will. So we are seeing a movement of this, and the biggest reason for the satellite and communications that they're providing is cost of deploying fiber. Okay, that is the biggest benefit. And yes, satellite communications to the homes and to the businesses is in the works right now. It's getting tested. You go in the middle of nowhere, just look at Miami-Dade County or West Palm Beach, where I am on the western suburbs. There's no way you can pull fiber through there. The cost of pulling that for 3 houses or 3 farms or community is not happening. Guess what the solution comes up is these satellite communications, because you don't want 10 gigabit circuit in your house for doing the work that you're doing out in those neighborhoods. So yes, satellite communication, leveraging satellite to connect devices, particularly if you're looking at remote areas and you are trying to monitor your electrical grid, you're trying to monitor any of the assets that are out there, environmental spills. Well, guess what? These satellite networks can be used because they can then talk to the IoT devices out in the field and communicate information. So,
Angel, go ahead, Avi. No, please.
So we are seeing testing of that. Actually, Jacobs is involved in a couple of those, and I think the details will come out once we have the proof. But yes, we are involved in testing on satellite communications, on the speed and things like that, and how it can be deployed.
And Avi, how do you think about that being, in the internet delivery business in such a big way? Are the things like, the Starlink and initiatives about delivering internet by satellite, is that something you think will really be serving more rural areas? Or is it something as you are a provider, particularly in urban areas, do you think that we'll be seeing that in urban areas as well?
I think it will be in rural areas, but you're also going to see some of the users come to the urban side of the equation. So it'll be a combination of both, but initial focus is going to be because the cost of deploying fiber in the middle of US is just not feasible.
Yeah.
So
I think it's more of
Angel, please.
a alternative to fiber or other means of connecting to the internet, as well as, again, we're in Hurricane Alley,
Yeah.
Having a backup, if something fails as you're going through one of these unfortunate events, you may want to be able to connect to, maybe police, fire, or what have you. And if the lines are down, although we are trenching underground, it could fail. So you do have a second or a third way of connecting to those critical infrastructure, for the cities, smart cities, to be able to then help their constituents.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is multiple satellites. So if you look at the picture that we have on the screen there, so there is a satellite that passing you on to the, let's say to the west of you, there is a satellite on the top of you, and there's a satellite coming on the east of you. So they all work in conjunction while these conditions of, whatever severe weather condition that you come in, such that you don't lose that emergency connectivity. And that's what they're getting tested today. But I will see that there will be more of those solutions being deployed for other services within the city.
But as we think about the next 10 years as a community, still having those, that's not going to replace, we don't think.
No, like Angel said, no, it's one more thing in your toolkit.
Got it.
Right.
Raimundo.
Yeah, one key point that I would like to provide like an example of why it is important to have a diverse and redundant network that have multiple channels of communication. And the best example that I can provide is Hurricane Irma in our case. So during Hurricane Irma, we lost like 80% of power throughout the city because we have a dense tree canopy, and then where many falling wires happened during that time. So in that situation, so we have to leverage all the layers of our foundation of high-speed communications. Because we have the city-owned fiber that remain connected in all cases, but we also had sites and remote public safety facilities like fire stations that we relied on other communication channels like leased fiber or aerial utility pole type of fiber that it went down during the hurricane right away. And we also had redundancy through metropolitan area networks that we leased from the PSTN. And at the same time, we also had city-owned wireless networks backbone that provided that backhaul of communications in some sites where we didn't have the fiber. And we leveraged 4G LTE wireless providers in some cases for some other remote sites. So, and the last resort was always our satellite communications. So we had those rapid deployment kits that we can provide anywhere for rescue recon or for situational awareness, or to connect to our drones when we need to inspect, for example, those areas that are not accessible because of fallen trees or electric hazard or flooding situation. So all those layers were leveraged. And even when we had, for example, our friends in the Florida Keys, when they also were affected seriously, and they even lost cellular communications, our fire department sent mutual aid with our handheld satellite phones. And for a couple of days, that was maybe the only communications that they had there for first responders. So what I'm trying to say is that this became actually a case study by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers and the IEEE University, that case study from Gables. And one of the key is automatic failovers and having multiple layers and a smart network that can fail over between different layers in different sites. So you keep those first responders always connected. You keep critical communications like 911 always on. So that is the importance that we learned, and that's that's a hard lesson because when I started in the city in 2004, we had like, I don't know, like 20 hurricanes, one after the other for 3 years.
Wow.
And we saw
Yeah.
firsthand how important it was. This is why I said at the beginning, it's a matter of survival, providing critical communications, life-saving services to our constituents. So that robust, diverse, multi-layers with automatic failovers and fault tolerance network is key to be able to survive, our challenge regions.
Matt,
Super interesting.
one of the key questions for Raimundo is, and this is, a lot of cities are asking Raimundo, and congratulations to Coral Gables. Remember, within the city, there are multiple departments and everybody has their own buckets of money and things that they want to do. How have you taken the leadership within the city of Coral Gables to integrate all of that and show them that, this is how we work together and this benefits all of us?
Those channels of communication, horizontal integration across functions, it is key. It is a team effort. So Smart Cities is a team effort within the organization, all the functional areas, the leadership of the organization that supports us. So that's something that we are fortunate that we have that clear support from our city leaders and from our community. But that has to be earned. So at the beginning of Smart Cities, we never went to the city commission and asked for funds for Smart Cities. So what is that? 6 or 7 years ago. So we had quick wins. So we had our first project we funded. We reduced 10% our IT OPEX budget during 1 year by implementing Lean Six Sigma and process improvement. So improving our own efficiency. Then that 10% went to R&D and to innovation. So our first IoT project was funded by that 10% cost reduction. So we didn't even have to ask for money. And then you prove the value. You provide the ROI, you show the proof of concept as a quick win, quick delivery that impacts quality of life. When we work together with the police department in our public safety project, we made it a smart policing project, and we developed that network of CCTV, ALPR, of visibility for public safety. And when Public Works is building a new streetscape, we work together with them, and then we put conduits for fiber optics. So we save cost in construction, the highest part of the cost normally of deploying broadband. Why? Because we aligned with the capital improvement project. And we built in the process that every time there is a CIP, there is always a review for by the T department. So we always make it a smart project, and we leverage the synchronicity, the working together, the teamwork between all the members. We have a strategic management plan that we meet all the departments. We meet constantly, and we work together to align all the projects, but also maximize the opportunities of interoperability and collaboration for cost savings.
Super interesting. So we're getting very close on time here. In fact, I think Jen and Tanya, you tell me if we're about there, but I just wanted to try and get a couple more questions in from the audience, and then follow up on one more that Olivia had raised. So we'll try to do these to the extent you can, full answers, but fairly brief answers. And that is that Gerardo asked a question about, 100% true that networks are the foundation and so important for economic development, improving quality of life, but ultimately a more engaged population is the goal. Talk about some specific advances that you see in terms of driving more community engagement. And I'll leave
jump in
that
here quickly.
Yeah.
Yes. So something that we're seeing, and it's kind of an underdog conversation at this level, is the power of decentralization and decentralization of government, decentralization of energy, decentralization of services, of finance. And that's happening through cryptocurrency and blockchain projects that, because humans can't really predict exponential growth, it will most likely take us by surprise. So there are tons of projects right now. If everyone, for example, had a non-fungible identity, we can all vote on things in the city, and everyone will know that their vote counts. And everyone would make decisions together in a decentralized way. And when that happens, people get involved, because then they think, they know that their vote counts. And I would be careful to kind of predict that things will go away or not. I mean, Avi mentioned that technology changed a lot. We didn't have, smart cell phones just not too long ago. So I think things that bring decentralization, low cost, and kind of joining the common voice will surprise us, and we should be looking at that.
Very cool. Very cool. Another question, we've talked about, given as we think around smart cities and the different emerging technologies, whether it's from electric vehicles and the car charging networks that were required to service them, to autonomous vehicles, which you mentioned, Avi. A question that came from Ray is, how are cities preparing for urban air mobility in the next 5 years? I know, I not too long ago had a conversation with some folks at Joby Aviation, where the whole vision is within the next few years. In Miami's case, I think the last we heard was the aim is 2024, where we have electric emission-free helicopter taxis ferrying people around a city. How are cities preparing for this, and how as residents should we be thinking about this? Avi, Raimundo?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example working with the city of Orlando. Thing flying up in the air. You need to be careful that it's not in a path of an airplane to come and crash to it or whatever. So we are testing those technologies for how can we leverage. So it's just like an Uber taxi, right? It's on delivering that. So the first deployment testing that we're doing is starting to be in Lake Nona, in which we will test and see if it works. And this is again working across the city of Orlando Utility Commissions, and UCF and half a dozen other stakeholders, because everybody needs to come on board, look at what the solutions are and what the benefits are.
I mean, here
So
in
it's being
Miami,
tested.
and here in Miami, do you think, Avi, and I'll turn to you, Raimundo, this is something that's really close and we should be talking about a lot more publicly? Yeah. Raimundo?
Yes, the city is invested in that. So, two trends in mobility is electrification and autonomy. So the city started investing years ago. We implemented the largest electric municipal vehicle fleet, almost 60 vehicles. We have electric vehicles in our city. And we work with companies like Freebie to implement electric shuttle that is free, provided to the residents. And of course, we had our own fleet of drones that we connect to either satellite or to wireless, and we use for multiple functions in the city, from public safety, etc. Now, the new smart state-of-the-art mobility hub that the city started, this project is going to have, for example, like a drone delivery area in the rooftop. It's gonna be more oriented toward electric vehicles, electric charging stations in the first level. The city has a comprehensive network of electric charging stations throughout the city to facilitate the adoption of EVs. And we also collaborate with the Department of Energy and other institutions like NIST in many projects. So there are many things coming. And there are many projects that I don't remember that I may not mention. For example, our collaboration with Ford and Argo AI on the autonomous vehicle pilot that is countywide, and our collaborations with other organizations that wants to have presence in our mobility hub. So basically, how does the future look like? So like I said, so electrification and autonomy will play a big factor in all those things, and we are already collaborating with many companies on that.
All right, so we'll go around the horn to close it out. To each one of you, quick answers if you can, as we think about the smart city future and the infrastructure we want and hope to have. What keeps you up at night, and what leaves you super optimistic and excited? And if you can, just some quick answers to leave us. And with that, why don't we start off with Avi? Why don't we start with you, and then Then we'll go to you, Olivia, and Angel, and then we'll go close out with Raimundo.
Well, I think the biggest challenge in the smart city side, I will be very honest with you, the funding and the money that is available. And that's what keeps you up night. Because at the end of the day, if I go to Raimundo and they say, hey, I'm putting a sensor, it's going to cost you $3,000. By the way, in 2 years, I'm going to come back and ask you another $3,000 just to replace it. So how do you leverage this public-private partnership, and how do you build that, and how you see that it works successfully is what keeps me up at night. Where's the money?
Where's the money? Olivia?
Yes, so we are super excited about digitization. We are concerned about the speed of digitization, but we are very excited to be able to analyze hundreds of cities at once and be able to predict optimal growth for those cities using artificial intelligence.
Awesome. Angel?
Really quick, I think access to the right of ways to be able to provide the services to everyone. And I think that that's what keeps me at night. The promising, I think, is just the vision that cities have for their residents and constituents. They want to be that smart city. So that vision, it's key to our success. And I think that in South Florida, we're ready to rock and roll.
Awesome. Awesome. Raimundo, close us out.
Risk management, cybersecurity, very highly regulated agency. We undergo 8 audits every year from all sides, from Homeland Security to PCI, etc. That keeps me up at night thinking, okay, we have to pass the compliance in all those different controls and make sure that we protect our enterprise and our constituents in this, especially in this high risk environment we are living today. So we all know what's happening to many organizations. So that's something that we take very, very seriously. And everything else, we are very excited, about what's happening. The present and the future is moving fast, but we are also making great progress. And I'm excited to see our community getting engaged, our young students, having great creativity and imagination from mid-school to higher education, or to anybody who is an entrepreneur today. That's very exciting, because everybody wants to solve problems. Everybody wants to make the world better and improve quality of life.
Well, Olivia, Avi, Angel, Raimundo, thank you very much for a terrific discussion. I know I've learned a ton from all of you, and I know everyone else has. Thank you very much. And I think with that, we turn it over to David. David, thank you.
Thank you. What a great conversation. Thanks again, Matthew. That was really, really inspiring and good information. And thanks to all of you for participating today and coming to join us with the New World Center Committee and Technology Committee. I want to thank our sponsors again, Baptist Health South Florida, Career Source, of course, Florida International University, Miami-Dade College, and of course, Wells Fargo. Thanks again, everyone. It was really fantastic. Get involved in your community and your chamber. And thanks a lot for joining us today.